coming to you direct from the nerve center of the galaxy's greatest comic. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast.
Borag Thung Earthlets, and welcome to the 2000 AD Thrillcast. I'm your host, Molch-R, and this is a bit of a special one for me this week because I had the privilege to interview one of my all-time favourite artists, Arthur Ranson. When I first read Shambhala, the Judge Anderson story from the very early 90s, I was completely blown away. It completely changed the way that I thought about comics and about what comic art could do. So I then embarked on a wonderful journey over the subsequent years, reading Arthur's artwork on things like Anderson, on Mazeworld, on Button Man, and it's not an exaggeration to say he's probably my favourite comic book artist. So it was wonderful to sit down and chat with him about his work, his career, how he feels about things, the work that he puts into it, and what it's like now that he's retired, looking back on his long career. This is the first of a two-part interview with the next part in 2 weeks' time. If you've been inspired by some of the things you've heard about on the 2008 Thrillcast, don't forget that collections of Arthur Ranson's work are available from the 2000 AD web shop and apps, including Anderson, Mazeworld, Button Man, and more. So let's not dilly-dally. Let's dive straight in and meet one of 2000 AD's most consistently popular artists, Arthur Ranson. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your background and where you're from, your childhood, that kind of thing? Let's start right at the beginning.
I mean, people can find all this stuff on my website. Just after I was born, Hitler tried to kill me with bombs in Hornchurch in Essex, where I was born. So I was born just before the bombing started. The London Blitz started.
Yeah.
My father's family came from Stratford, East End of London. So they were not Cockneys exactly, but almost.
Yeah.
But my mother married my father, who was a labourer when she married him. But she was very ambitious for her children. I have 4 brothers. All of them, except one, finished up in professions because she was very ambitious, and somehow that rubbed off on all of us. Let me think. So I went to a technical school, which was pretty rubbish at school, and from there I had an apprenticeship as a stamp and banknote designer, and I hated every minute of it. I really hated that job. And what I was being trained to do was work really tiny. Painting stamps at stamp size. What you're doing, you're painting portraits onto stamps at stamp size.
So almost kind of smaller than miniatures,
yeah,
kind of thing. Wow.
Yeah. And it was just incredibly, it couldn't have been less creative. But they did, in the second year of the apprenticeship, they gave me a day off once a week to go to art school and do life drawing and design. And I managed to convince them the next year to send me 2 days a week. And I more or less became an art student, basically.
Right. Yeah.
I thought of myself as being an art student, just having to do 3 days of work a week at Waterlow's. And then when he put it was a 5-year apprenticeship, when that finished, I was going to go to art school, and that was it. I'd made up my mind what to do. In those days, I would have got a grant to go. Three of us planned to go off and live in a caravan together and be art students. But my mother and dad objected to that, so I stayed at home actually. I went to Walthamstow Art School. I mean, the part-time day release was at South East Sussex, isn't it? In Dagenham.
Right. Okay.
The college I went to full-time was Southwest. Have I got that wrong? in Walthamstow.
Right.
So I spent 3 years there instead of a normal 4 because I'd had some previous experience, and should have gone and applied to go to the Royal College and didn't get in.
Didn't you accidentally get told that you had got in or something? Right.
Bastard. No, but I can understand it because practically everybody from that year who applied to go to Royal College got in. And why I wasn't one of them, I just cannot imagine. Because some of the people that went were absolute rubbish. So I don't understand what happened there.
Right.
So I guess why I was told I had got in, because by the head of the school, he had been told that 6 people had got in, and he just assumed I was one of them because I was one of their best students.
Right.
Which I was. I was well thought. I'd say so myself.
So, having been an apprentice banknote designer and stamp designer, which is one of the strangest kind of job titles I think I've heard someone describe. You did printing and printmaking at art college.
Yeah.
What were the? Do you see the skills that you learnt there having influenced you? Was there a degree of meticulousness and ideas of design, things like that were useful later on, or couldn't you wait to get out?
I'm not conscious of any particular thing affected the way I draw comics. I mean, when I started drawing comics, I never had any intention of becoming a comic book artist.
Yeah.
The last thing in my life, I thought I might be an illustrator. And all the things, I mean, you learn stuff and you just use it without thinking about that.
Sure.
I mean, it just becomes part of the way you see the world or the way you make stuff, but not specifically. I mean, it's an interesting thought, the idea that printmaking might affect the way I draw comics. So I never crossed my mind before. No.
But you read comics, didn't you, as a kid?
Oh yeah. I was a big. Comics are a big part of our childhood. All the kids read comics and swapped comics. Although, once the Eagle folded, I don't think I read any comics for a long time after that.
Right, the original Eagle.
Oh yeah,
Frank Hampson.
Is there another one?
There was in the 80s, but it was a different beast.
Yeah, the Eagle was absolutely mind-blowing when it first came out. It was just so much better than anything else. I mean, not just the artwork, which was extraordinary, but the ideas in it, the way it was all put together. It was a great comic.
And because there were so many titles back then, so there wasn't just the Eagle. There was things like obviously the Beano and Dandy, but you got Lion as well. I don't know if Hotspur was your kind of period or anything like that.
I mean, when I was a kid, we would regularly get the Beano, the Dandy, Film Fun, radio fan, or at least we would see, because we would do swaps.
Sure.
There was also Hotspur, Wizard, and Champion. But they looked like comics, but they were texts. They were all written stories. There's no picture strips in them at all originally.
Yeah.
And they were what the older boys read.
Right.
What we saw there. I mean, some of those titles carried on and changed and became more like regular comics. But yeah, and I still remember the heroes from some of those comics. I mean, Wilson. Do you know Wilson? You ever heard of Wilson? A great athlete, mystery athlete, would turn up at any athletic event that was going and win, and then gallop off into the distance. It was true.
And, one thing that has cropped up a lot when I've interviewed people for the podcast and when I've interviewed them for print interviews as well is many artists and writers as well have a kind of eureka moment when they realise that comics are made by people. You know, they don't suddenly appear out of nowhere. That there is an artist, that there is a writer, that it is a process. Was there a moment like that for you where it dawned on you that this was a career that could be pursued?
No, it didn't work that way for me.
Right.
No, I mean, I got into comics because I was doing illustration and I was doing covers. I mean, because of what I'd learned as a stamp and banknote designer, I could do portraits and do very realistic kind of illustrations. So I was doing that for advertising and looking for work. I went to look in because they had stars, celebrities on the cover,
Sure.
painted. So I said I can do that. So I was doing that for them. I've told this story so many times.
No, carry on.
I was in their office delivering some work, and they were in a panic because Brian Lewis, who was drawing Superflop, had just walked out. It just left him in lurch.
Right.
So I said, I can do that. And they said, okay, we'll try. So I went home and they gave me a script. I went home and tried to draw a page with Superflop. What's the name of the guy that did Superflop?
Les Dawson.
Les Dawson, yeah. Les Dawson Superflop. I thought it'd be... imagine it would be easy. I mean, it looks easy, doesn't it? You look at a page of Lewis's artwork and you think, yeah, that's easy. I think it took me all week to do this single page, and I had about 8 goes before I could do anything I was prepared to take to look in. But anyway, they accepted it, so that was my way into there. And it was nice getting regular money. I mean, as a freelance illustrator, I sometimes had got ridiculous amounts of money for doing an illustration, and then long periods of nothing to do at all. So having regular weekly work was really nice. But then the longer I was doing comics, the more I started thought, I like this. This is interesting. This is more fun, and the people are nicer than they are in advertising. So I more or less gave up illustration and started taking, and that was really when I started trying to learn how to do comics properly and find my way of doing it. And I was stealing from everybody. I mean, any artist I saw that I liked, I tried to draw like them. It was. I mean, the variety of stuff I did for looking was just ridiculous. I mean, it looks like the work of about at least 4 different artists.
Oh, you were there for
long.
72 to 89, I think.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a time.
I mean, something clearly worked there.
Colin Shelbourne I thought was a terrific editor. I mean, he seemed to get the best out of everybody. I really liked working with him. It was for a while the most successful comic in the country. I mean, the biggest sales. I mean, it's sneered at by all the real comic people, of course, because it was taking stuff from other sources. But it was great. I mean, kids loved it.
What was, because I wanted to ask you about Colin, because he's a figure that I'll be honest, I've never come across before in histories of British comics and things like that. And as you say,
You've not come across Colin Sherwin before?
No. Tell me about him. What was he like?
Well, he looked like a geography teacher. And he'd been to art school. I know that. Actually, I didn't know much about him really. He'd been to art school. He finished up in looking as a sub-editor. Then became the editor. And the comic got better when he became editor. I thought. But he just seemed really sensible, nice, and ambitious for the comic rather than for himself. I always thought,
right,
and was prepared to take chances and try stuff out. He was a great editor. I don't know what happened to him after looking. Being a bit careless with people.
With something like Looking, where it's licensed strips, you know, so you've got things like Sapphire Steel, Danger Mouse that you worked on, Wurzel Gummidge, all the greats of kind of kids TV and in the 70s and 80s. Was for you was it as you said, a good way to learn how to do comics, because there was visual reference there which you had because it was on the TV.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, I mean, it suited me. I mean, because I found portraits really easy to do.
Sure.
I mean, always have. So if I was drawing, I don't know, whoever, I wanted it to actually look like them, because a lot of those comics didn't.
Yeah.
But doing real portraits of the characters, of the actors, meant everything else had to look real as well, you see.
Yeah.
So I had to research cars and motorbikes and telephones and streets and lampposts and absolutely every bloody thing. So it matched. So
that's really interesting. That kind of you have to make sure that everything fits within the world. So you have to learn how that's a brilliant way to essentially teach yourself how to render anything, really, even if you didn't mean to.
Well, I must admit, I was shocked at how badly some portraits of people were drawn.
Really?
Yeah, that doesn't look like so and so. I was shocked by that.
So, in terms of getting work from Looking, you did this initial page, and that was your in to working for them. How did that evolve over time? Was it just that they go, well, here's a safe pair of hands that we can trust, or was it more of was there like an apprenticeship almost over time?
Well, the way I remember it, I never stopped work. I worked ever since for them. There's never a time when I didn't have a script to do.
Sure.
I can't remember what came after Superflop.
Michael Bentine's Potty Time.
Yeah.
There you go. The old. He was one of the goons, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was the least attractive of the goons. But that was written by Robin Tuchek, supposedly.
Right.
But he was terrible. he would write either very little or nothing at all, right. And I was kind of making it up as I went along and drawing in a really odd style. So I wouldn't think that was the highlight of my career, actually, the posses. We went to see Michael Bentine for some reason.
What was he like?
I don't think I've ever met a more egotistical man in my life. I mean, he just wanted to talk about himself.
Right. Were these, because when you're working on strips in which you are rendering actual likenesses and using reference and whatnot, it's not like now where you can just Google whatever you want.
No.
What were you using at the time? Was it just straight off the TV, or did you get stills?
Looking with supplier stuff.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, if I would pick stuff up in magazines and papers and stuff. I was thinking that redoing the Elvis thing recently. If I'd had Google, that would have been a much better script.
I mean, we'll come on to talk about the Beatles book in a bit, but it was interesting looking at that, where clearly you've used like famous photographs of the Beatles and things like that. Again, this is a subject that we'll come on to. You said that you were good at portraiture when you're doing pen and ink line work. Was that different? Was that sort of an evolution of being able to do portraits, or were you always able to do them in pen and ink?
Well, I did work hard at learning how to use pen and ink. I mean, I bought books on drawing and books on artists that I admired, and finally found the ink and the pen and the board that all kind of worked for me. But I didn't. I can't say finding going from drawing in pen and ink, drawing characters in pen and ink, as opposed to painting them. That just struck me as a problem.
Well, I mean, that's interesting in itself. That you know, all the while that you're being asked to draw in different styles and different characters, different genres, and in different ways, you adapted to that. I mean, that is, as we've said, quite an education for somebody who's relatively fresh to comics.
And I mean, it could also be a drawback. I mean, for some people, they hit upon a style really early, and they stick with it, and it's great all the time through. But I was constantly saying, "No, do it this way. I'll do it this way," and keep changing. Yeah. So yeah.
Because the production values on Looking were quite high, weren't they?
Yeah.
Lots of colour printing. And whatnot.
Yeah, nice glossy paper.
I suppose that's an advantage because you look at the stuff that IPC was putting out. So things like Battle and Action in the 70s, and by and large they're on poor paper. They're black and white. They're very much fixed to a formula where you have the opportunity to experiment.
Yeah. I mean, there's no. I mean, I did a job for. There's a short-lived comic called Target, which I did a job for. They actually asked me to use a heavier line and flat. They printed in flat colours. It was terrible. I mean, absolutely unbelievable that they were doing that at that period. So it was because there was never any problem with Looking. I mean, I never had to think about how I was making the drawing because I could rely on them printing it.
Right. I interviewed Kelvin Gosnell, who's he's the editor who took over from Pat Mills on 2008 at the very beginning, and he launched Star-Lord, which was using offset printing rather than the standard one. And what was really interesting was he said that they went to visit the presses, the IPC presses, and there was that 3-story high number 3 press, I think it was, and they had to keep it running. So that's why they did all the comics. He said was to keep this thing going, so that it could print the newspapers every day. So it makes a delicious kind of sense that yes, they are on the cheapest paper, they're using the cheapest ink, because they're just Well,
that's how comics started in America, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just because they had a lot of paper to use up.
That's one question I didn't ask you. Did you have any exposure to American comics?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we saw we saw Superman and Batman. But that was a period when Batman was absolutely rubbish. It really was. It was with giant objects, you know.
Yeah.
Like
the massive penny that he keeps in his cave.
Some really stupid ideas and pretty ugly drawing, I thought.
Right.
But anyway, Batman. But I also saw Captain Marvel somehow.
Right.
And Captain Marvel Jr., both which I absolutely adore. They were by far and away the best comics ever when I saw them. I can't imagine, unless it was American soldiers or airmen.
Right.
Because there were Americans around in Essex up till 1945, 46.
Okay.
When I would have been 7.
Because these comics would have been quite different to the British stuff that you were reading at the time. Because you got Frank Hampson's Down There, which is beautiful and very,
Well, that was a lot. That was late. That was later.
Yeah. But if you look at something like the Beano and Dandy, very kind of down to earth, working class humour. Then you get something like Captain Marvel, which is the kind of fantastical stuff. That's a theme actually I'll come on to later when we talk about other stuff. But I guess this would have been just odd issues that came your way.
I didn't see it regularly, but it did make a big impression. I liked the drawing, and I thought Captain Marvel was just a great character. It's just a shame that they've completely botched him up since. They couldn't make up their mind what to do with him. It's a shame.
We were talking about writers briefly a minute ago, and we talked about the Beatles and Elvis and whatnot, and Angus Allan is somebody that you worked extensively with at Look-In. Was that a partnership that you pursued, or was it just how it happened that you worked well together, so you got his scripts?
Well, Angus wrote everything there was that went into Look-In, so there wasn't any choice really.
There you go then. Sorry, I was just checking the microphone.
He was just incredibly versatile. I mean, he could write anything for anybody. And after we'd been to Liverpool together, we did get on quite well as friends. We saw a lot of each other, went out drinking lunch times and stuff.
So let's just talk about that Liverpool trip a little bit, because you're researching the Beatles strip. So you both had a jolly up to Liverpool.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was just it was useful. I mean, I got a lot of reference photographs. But I imagine we spent more time in bars than we did actually tramping the streets looking for rare bits of Beatlemania. So, but it was then because Angus always thought I was a cold fish,
right?
Until we'd been to Liverpool and discovered that I could drink as much as he could. Nearly, not quite.
Such things are lasting friendships made of, I guess.
Yeah.
What was his advantage as a writer? Because you don't get relied upon to write virtually everything that's in a magazine like Look-In unless you're a steady pair of hands.
Yeah, I've no idea how he did it. I've no idea how he did it, because he must have been fast, because he took a hell of a... No, perhaps it was just the time that I spent with him. He wasn't writing when he was with me. He would come around ostensibly to discuss strips, but not really. I mean, it was just to get lashed, basically. Terrible.
Was there... how to describe this? You've already kind of touched on it with people's attitude towards something like Look-In, because it was licensed stuff. It was TV and cartoons and whatnot. A certain degree of snobbery around something like that it's not proper comics. Angus sounds very much like a journeyman, like the kind of person who knows how to do this and absolutely bangs it out every time, and is skilled at it.
Yeah.
But isn't necessarily pursuing loftier ideals.
No. No. I mean, Angus wasn't. I mean, like a writer for 2000 AD nowadays is making a name for himself, creating his own personality, his own fans. Angus wasn't interested in that stuff. Right. It was just a job, and you had to pay. What Stuart Lee calls a what's the expression? Something provider. Do you know Stuart Lee? Do you know Stuart Lee?
Hang on, let me.
I just went to see him last week.
Right.
Content provider.
Content provider. There we go.
Angus was a content provider, and which makes perfect sense.
Because was he doing any other writing? Was he writing novels or short stories or anything? Was he just doing Looking, and that was what he did?
I'd be surprised if he wasn't doing other stuff for other people, but not much. I mean, because he had worked. He'd done a lot of cowboy comics at one time.
Right.
Told me some stories I'm not sure they're true or not about cowboy comics.
Such as?
In comic strip lettering, let me think. L-I can look like a U. You know the story? Yeah, you told me that. he claims he once wrote Clint flicked the rump of his horse. I don't know if it's true or not.
What did you learn from Looking?
You're editing this, I think.
Oh yeah. Don't worry about it. What did you learn from Looking in terms of the way to tell a story? Because if there were writers who didn't give you an awful lot, talking about the I can't remember what strip it was earlier, but where a writer doesn't necessarily put in a lot of work, the onus then falls on you as the artist to tell the story. What were the lessons that you learned from Looking about telling stories in comic books?
But I never had any problems with Angus. The one thing I did do was I was always inclined to add panels to what I was asked to do, because I think things needed linking up. Certainly when Danger Mouse started, I suggested instead of the standard was 6 panels per page, I suggested for Danger Mouse we do 9,
right?
Because it didn't make any difference. I mean, it was if it was 6, you couldn't get any more information about Danger Mouse by doing it bigger. so I thought, do it smaller. Yeah. Keep it. So I suggest we do it 9 frames a page. Without giving a thought to Angus having to write it. And what made it worse is that Colin thought it was such a good idea, he applied it to all the other strips as well. So everyone finished up with twice half as much again work to do. But I still think it was a good idea.
Well, I guess if you're doing a strip like Danger Mouse, then that's an action strip. You know, there's always something happening. There will be rarely a moment of extended quiet. So to convey more action, then more panels can make sense.
It's if you do it bigger, it's exactly the same picture, just bigger. Right?
Yeah.
So you don't get more by doing a bigger picture.
Yeah.
The only way you can get more is by doing more pictures.
You got an award from Cosgrove.
Oh, yes.
Hall,
Do you want to see it?
Yeah, by all means. There it is. Oh, wow.
It's really great, isn't it?
Yeah. The Danger Mouse and Penfold Good Grief / Oh Crikey Award. Oh, brilliant. Oh, bomb's fallen off.
The only award I ever got.
Fantastic. And that was for...
For what we did with Danger Mouse.
Right.
And look at, I mean, Angus went on and wrote some scripts for Cosgrove and Hall.
Oh, right, okay.
And they used one of our characters too. I wish I got paid for. Some owl or something, I think I drew.
Because you had a fairly extensive relationship with them, because you did the Count Duckula strip as well.
Yes, I quite like the Count Duckula. Angus was so keen on it, but I quite liked it.
So that was one of my favourite cartoons when I was a kid.
Was it?
Yeah, it was Count Duckula. Never got... Look, it's weird. I mean, I know it kept going until 89, but living up in the wilds of Lancashire, I don't think I ever saw a copy of Looking on the shelves. It was all sort of Marvel UK and the occasional 2000 AD that pop up. Yeah, no Looking. So let's talk a little bit about your influences, because one of the things that I've noticed when people look at your stuff is they describe you as being in the European tradition. So you're less like American comics and more like the kind of bande dessinée books. Is that something that's been conscious or unconscious?
No, it's quite conscious. Yeah, I mean, I bought more continental albums and books than I did American ones. You want to see my bookshelf?
Yeah, by all means. Let me pick this up.
I've got a bookshelf out there, but that's all only my stuff.
Oh, right.
But this is the stuff I bought.
Oh, right, okay.
So, I mean, a lot of this is continental stuff.
I mean, what sort of people are we talking about?
I can't remember their names now. Mobius,
Yeah.
certainly. But I used to get... I should have put my glasses in, shouldn't I? And I used to buy albums. So you get all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it's Spirou, yeah.
I mean, I came back with this Spirou album every time I went to France, I should think.
Oh, you've got some Nemo in Slumberland over there, and
Well, yeah. I mean, some early stuff. I was intending to write a book about comics, and I did a lot of research,
Right.
history and stuff.
yeah.
But then, what's his name? I got such a terrible memory for names.
Is it Gifford, Gravett?
No. The guy that my intention was to do a history,
Yeah.
but describing how comics work and stuff like that.
Right, okay.
So then there was that seminal book by
Oh, Scott McCloud.
Scott McCloud.
Right, there
that
we
came
go.
out, so I scrapped my idea. I thought you said all this needs to be said.
Right. So in terms of the stuff that you say that whenever you used to go to France, you'd come back with a Spirou album and all this. In terms of what you learned from
European comics?
Well, I was reading books about comics and how they were. I was interested in how comics worked, and I kind of looked at that. What the thing about continental comics as opposed to American comics, they seem much more story orientated rather than character oriented. I mean, you really got a double page spread of two guys punching each other's heads in a continental comics. It just seem more, I don't know, more grown up. I get it.
Well, if you look at the BD market, then they have every sort of genre and age range under the sun. But one of the things I find fascinating is that they still have such a rich tradition of humour comics and, for want of a better word, serious comics. And I think that's probably the closest comparison to what you were doing on Looking, because you were doing humour comics and you were doing the sort of serious, your Sapphires and Sapphire and Steels and things like that. Did you have a preference between the different ones?
I really enjoyed doing Danger Mouse and Duckula, but I wanted to be a serious artist. So I wanted to attract the same sort of people that Brian Bonham was attracted.
Right.
So
Okay.
I wouldn't like a real comic artist as opposed to it's pure snobbish. It's pure snobbishness. It's got absolutely nothing to do with quality or at all.
Well, I mean, on your blog, in other interviews, you've talked about the impact that Bolland made for you on things.
Yeah.
Everybody. Do you want to describe what that impact was?
Well, on the part of being able to draw really well, Brian Bonham always looked as though, I mean, he took it seriously. He did his own thing, and he made it look like something you could do for love rather than just as a content provider, so to speak. That was why I thought it was so significant. And I don't know if this is true, but my impression was that people looked at Brian Bonham and thought, perhaps I could become a comic strip artist, because I mean I got an eccentric style, but it's mine and I love it and I want to do it. Yeah.
Because he came along at the time when comics were changing quite profoundly. So, you got 2000 AD, you'd had Battle in Action. Licensed comics continued, but in many ways the people who were making them were changing. So I think other people have said the late 70s, early 80s is when fans of comics began to produce comics, when they started being the ones who were writing and drawing them. I mean, how inspirational was that for you? Because obviously you make the switch to 2000 AD in the 80s, but what effect did seeing Bolland and the effect that he had have on you and your work?
Well, in practical terms, I mean, none probably. I mean, I don't think his way he drew affected the way I drew, or the way he told sort of stories didn't affect the way I told stories.
But in terms of how you thought about,
but it was how much more admirable and acceptable he made comics seem. Right. I think.
Because that was the beginning of that process. Within a few years, you've got Swamp Thing. Alan Moore comes along. You've got Swamp Thing. You've got Dark Knight Returns. You've got Watchmen.
Yeah, I mean, comic strip artists and writers used to be like, I don't know, workmen. They went to work and did their job and went home again.
Sure.
But after Bond, they seem to be more like musicians. You know.
There's a big thing at the time about credit and about being given due credit for your work. And I noticed, you sign your page in the Beatles. The Beatles artwork and in the Elvis stuff as well, you sign your artwork very clearly. I mean, because did Looking ever have credit boxes?
No. And they didn't allow you to sign work either,
right,
for a long time. But when they did, I took advantage. And Pat Mills giving artists credit was just remarkable. I thought just a terrific thing to do.
Well, the person who did it was Kevin O'Neill.
Oh, was it?
Well, he was art editor, and I think they got 3 issues out before the higher ups clocked what was happening, and of course hit the roof and like, you can't do this. And it was too late by that point. They'd already done it. So I think all my life I've advocated a do it and then ask permission mentality because I know that story.
Oh, well done, Kevin.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you describe the effect of Bolland as being artists being considered musicians, because there was that awakening within the British readership in a way that hadn't necessarily happened before. Were you, and don't take this question wrong, were you just looking for some more recognition? Were you just hoping for a bit more appreciation for what you were doing, rather than just being a journeyman?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, I'm as vain and glory grabbing as the next man, I guess. But yeah, I mean, wanted to be, that's what makes you an artist, isn't it? It's kind of look at me, I'm special. That's why I started drawing.
In terms of your process, there's an elephant in the room which you've talked about on your blog about your battle against the phrase photorealism.
Yeah,
and what you feel is its misapplication to what you do. Do you want to explain a little bit about A, where this has come from, B, your objection to the use of the term in regard to your work?
Well, if I heard something described as photorealist, I would imagine it looked like a photograph. Mm. Now, I cannot imagine how people can look at a pen and ink drawing and say it's photographic. I mean, it's not. It's black lines and white spaces. It's not photographic at all. It may look realistic, or even that term is strange, isn't it? Realistic. It may make you think of or bring to mind the object that it represents, but it's only lines on a page. It's not a photograph.
Because you used a what do you call it? A grant projector
for a long time.
For a long time, yeah. Do you think that's why?
Well,
where people get this from?
Well, that made it easier for me to stick with the style that I'd started with making things look real. No, it was just on the back of some book or comic or something. Somebody used the term photorealistic artwork about my stuff, and for some reason it stuck, and it's driven me nuts ever since.
So I read one,
not as much as it used to.
Well, there was a whole blog post where you say, was it when I was told I was getting into art college, but then I was told I wasn't. I didn't punch the guy. I didn't punch somebody when I had a road rage incident and they were shouting at me. But I feel like I need to punch this person for photorealism. But there was an interesting analysis as a comics critic called Zainab Akhtar,
is a huge fan of yours. And she did this great analysis of your work on Batman. And
Oh, really? Where can I find that?
It's I'll send you a link actually when I get back to the office.
Please do.
Because she's a huge fan, and it's very much kind of drilling down into the kind of balances and ideas within the work. And she's a big fan of Anderson and Mazeworld. But there's a line that she uses, which is photorealism isn't photoreference. And that kind
That's
of
true too, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's clear you've used photo reference a lot throughout your career, but it's kind of in many ways photorealism diminishes as a term, as you said, kind of diminishes the effort that's gone into making it look photo. You know,
Make it look real.
Yeah.
Not make it look photographic.
No.
I have done photorealistic drawings with a pencil. But nobody would mistake those for comic work.
So I suppose also it comes back to what you were saying about when you were doing the licensed stuff for Looking, where you've got to create a realistic world around these characters that are real. So if you're not making them look real, then it's not working, is it?
That was something else that was important to me, making the world that in the comic look real. That's why it was important to me, so that if you saw something from one angle and then saw it from a different angle, it still looked like you were in the same room or same space.
Right.
That was important. And in fact, affected the way I drew comics, made comics, why I put in backgrounds.
Because some of those backgrounds are quite substantial. I mean, if you we'll come on to your stuff on Judge Anderson and Judge Dredd in a bit, but there's a lot of detail in your backgrounds that almost kind of ground your characters. You create a world that seems very real, but that's a lot of work to put into a comic book panel.
So, yeah, I don't know what you mean by a lot of work. I mean, it's work. I mean, what you do.
Right.
I mean, a lot or less. I mean, yeah. I mean,
have you never sort of been halfway through rendering a big Mega City 1 background and thought, this is taking a long time? No?
No.
That's interesting.
It's
yeah.
No, it's not strange. I mean, it's what I do. It's what I enjoy doing, and I like to be able to do it. And I mean, again, I come back to this thing about it's kind of. It might be showing off. No, it's not. It's I'm drawing a strip of this character doing stuff. I want them to be in a real place, or believable place, a convincing place, or at least not a place where, if you give it a moment's thought, you realise couldn't possibly exist.
Yeah.
Or backgrounds that come and go, or that don't make sense. The one frame doesn't make sense to the next if you analyse what's going on. That really drives me nuts in comics. Why can't I just do it properly? That's what I keep thinking. And so I try to do it properly.
Yeah.
And it's nice if people notice that.
Is there a certain degree of pride in doing something like that that you wish to be proud of?
I was brought up never to congratulate yourself about anything. Know your place, keep quiet, don't make a fuss. But just lately, looking back at work I've done long ago, I think that's bloody good. Well done you, who did that.
I don't think anybody would sort of condemn you for taking a little bit of pride in your work after a career. Let's talk a bit about the switch to 2000 AD. You want to explain how that came about? Because you've been solidly on Looking for quite a substantial period of time, almost 20 years.
Well, I was warned that looking was on its last legs.
Right.
So there was nowhere else to go, really, was there? In those days, there was looking or 2000 AD. Where else was there? So yeah, I went and saw. I want to call him John, but I don't.
Would it either been Steve McManus or Richard Burton?
Richard Burton. I went and saw Richard Burton, took him some work, and he immediately gave me a job and a glass of beer and a sandwich, I think. And then I never stopped working. There was short space, but yeah, I stayed with them ever since. I mean, I was slightly surprised that they took me on. Actually, somehow I didn't imagine myself as being a 2000 AD artist, but Richard was quite encouraging, so that was good.
Because had you sort of come into contact with 2000 AD professionally before? You know, did you know people who worked on it?
I met a few of them at the Society of Strip Illustration, but I wasn't matey with any of them.
Yeah,
but I'm not a very matey sort of person, so that's probably says more about me than it does about them.
Because you go into it in quite some detail on your blog, so it's spaced over various blog posts about the lack of interference that you received at 2000 AD. And it's something that's cropped up in lots of interviews I've done before about how you're trusted to do it in the best way possible. It sounds very much that this was a breath of fresh air after the constraints of somewhere like Looking, where you are having to conform to how things are meant to be portrayed.
Yeah, it's funny. I think all the time I was looking, only once did something I did get objected to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't know why I was quite so, but it felt different. It did feel different. I mean, I was aware that Colin was looking at it all the time and judging it and stuff. Whereas at 2000, this is probably quite unfair to the editors, but I always they just said, "Okay, go away and get on with it."
Right.
And I guess if they didn't like it, they just would call you again. I suppose.
Because that first work on it was Triad. Anderson Triad was your.
No, the first thing I think did was a Judge Dredd thing.
Oh, right. Okay.
With goes to a horror house and fights a giant spider.
Because having done sort of a lot of contemporaneous stuff and a lot of cartoon stuff, to then go to a kind of a hard sci-fi dystopian setting.
I'd been doing Sapphire Steel,
right,
and stuff.
Was that
so? It didn't feel quite such a jump as all that.
Yeah. What was your take on Judge Dredd? Did you have any feelings towards him as a character?
I thought it was a great character.
Yeah.
But no, I like Judge Dredd. I would have liked to have drawn more Judge Dredd, but for some reason, I did that one.
Yeah.
Which was, and the only other Judge Dredd I've done ever since have been humorous ones. I think, what? Why John Wagner thought to give me a humorous? I mean, not just once, but every time he gave me a Judge Dredd strip, he gave me a humorous one. And I'm crap at humour, especially that kind. So it's a shame. I would like to have done a nice, what was it, the Wasteworld kind of.
Oh, Cursed Earth.
Cursed Earth kind of, yeah,
Right.
I'd have to do that.
I wonder whether it's to do with the kind of nature of deadpan humour, because the strips you did do with Dredd that were humorous.
Except they weren't, were they?
Well, they were humorously horrific. I mean, there's that.
Not funny. Certainly not funny.
That Christmas one where the spurned lover gets the sniper rifle and starts shooting all the Father Christmases and whatnot. I had a chuckle at that, but then I was about 14 years old.
There's the one where the guy gets trapped in the toilet.
Yeah.
What was he thinking? What was the other one? Oh, the other one where alternative reality gardening thing.
Oh, I can't remember that one.
No, just okay. Don't worry about it. You don't need to.
With so you make Switch 2080. You do some Judge Dredd.
I did a Judge Dredd story,
Judge Dredd.
and then Alan Grant got in touch with me. Did what was it? What Triad?
Triad, yeah. Now that was very noirish, very dark, lots of shadows. What's your? Do you have a specific memory of working on Triad?
Well, I know I used some funny techniques. I'd been to New York and seen an exhibition of some work, and I pinched one of the techniques from that exhibition by cutting stuff up and stripping it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I remember mostly about that. Because looking back at it now, I wonder whether it was such a good idea.
Well, because that was the strip where I'm in one of the odd issues of 2080 that sort of made its way into my hands. That was one of the stories where it's the Burns Night Supper.
Yeah.
And the ram barges through the wall and says, "Burns Night, I'll give you Burns." Now, I'll be frank with you, I was 10 years old? I had nightmares about that image for ages. Just that massive ram's head and the way the fire kind of came out the side of the mouth. And it for me, that's kind of
Joy.
scarred me for life. But for me, that's kind of emblematic of one of the things that I like about the way that you draw is it's one of the styles that seems to bring in things from outside. So as you say, some artists will pick a style and will stick with it, and everything will be realized within that style. But you always seem, in your pursuit of making things look real, making them look grounded, you seem to bring in ways of viewing, ways of looking, ways of seeing from outside of comics. So there's a kind of almost classical, with something like that ram's head, the way it's rendered, it looks almost kind of like a classical etching. Were you conscious of that? Was that something that...
Well, I was certainly trying to learn to draw with pen and ink, and looking at, I won't know their names now, but I was looking at Victorian, 18th century, any artist that could draw well with a pen and ink.
Yeah.
And I was practicing drawing with pen and ink. So, but when it comes to actually drawing, I mean, how you draw depends what it is you're trying to, not just the object, but the kind of mood you want to attach to the object.
Oh yeah, that's it. Particularly on something like Triad, when it's so moody, it was so noirish and whatnot. It felt very different to the stuff that you'd done before. Because number one, it was in black and white when you'd done so much colour stuff before, and number two, it was so thick with atmosphere.
Oh, that's nice. Good.
One thing I did want to ask about is we touched on the kind of freedom, the increased freedom you seem to have on 2000 AD, and you've kind of mentioned on your blog about feeling that this allowed you to begin to achieve a degree of potential that you hadn't necessarily been able to achieve before. Number one, what potential was that, and how did it allow you to expand?
Well, the things that brings to mind is page layouts. I started feeling I could use circular frames and pages with all sorts of odd tricks and stuff on.
Yeah,
which was almost certainly influenced, but that was European influence. Mobius and his friend whatever his name was. Jesus, terrible memory for names. Lone Sloan. Do you know Lone Sloan?
I don't.
Who drew that? It's a terrific comic.
I can have a look. Since all of world knowledge is at my fingertips. Would help if I could type. Lone Sloan. There we go. Oh, Philippe Drouillet?
Right, Drouillet, yeah.
Drouillet, there we go.
Yeah.
So this was you kind of drawing in, again, influences from outside. And there is a line that you mention on your blog about starting at 2000 AD, creating a kind of love affair with
Anderson.
Anderson. And
She's
the stuff
great,
you were
isn't
doing. Well, let's talk a bit more in depth about Anderson, because we've already talked about Brian Bolland, who co-created it, had a very particular look, and there had been numerous artists since. So there were people like Brett Ewins, Barry Kitson had already done stuff. Did you consciously draw from them, or
No, when I was designing my Anderson, I started with Brian Bolland's one, but I didn't want it to look as though I'd copied Brian Bolland. So I was quite consciously trying to make it look different.
yeah?
For instance, I didn't give it high heels. High heels seems silly for a policewoman, so I took away the high heels. In fact, Brian Bolland once said he thought I was the best Anderson. He thought my Anderson was the definitive Anderson, which for Brian Bolland just left me speechless.
That is quite a compliment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I believe him, but it was really nice to hear. Yeah. But Alan Grant really takes credit for creating Anderson. He did make seem like a real rounded person. I mean, she had been, prior to Anna and I working on it, she had been kind of a bit of a bimbo in some respects.
Right.
A bit of tutty hung in there. But no, she did change when Chandler and I got hold of her. My impression was she got much more serious.
Yeah, she gets more serious. It seems she goes from being an action character to being more thoughtful.
Yeah.
And being about, rather than necessarily just fighting crime or demons or whatever, she's much more conscious of the consequences of that fight. So, you get a story like Triad, which is about child abuse. You get a story about Shambhala, which is about sacrifice. So she starts having themes in a way that she didn't necessarily, she had stories before, but then she starts having themes, and that coincides with you and Alan working together.
Well, yeah, I give it. As I say, I give all the credit to Alan for that. I don't know whether the way I was drawing it was influenced the way he was writing it, but I don't know. You have to ask Alan that. But yeah, I mean, I liked it. The more serious it got, the better I liked it. It suits me. I mean, because it was. I mean, the same thing with when we were doing Mazeworld. And Alan's complained once or twice about the fact that I said I didn't want it to be funny. I wanted it to be a serious fantasy story, because I was thinking of European stuff basically. Yeah. And Alan complained about that. He said he spoiled the story because he couldn't put any jokes in it, which wasn't what I meant at all. I meant it to be a serious fantasy story, as opposed to kind of made fun of itself. But he, yeah, I mean, I think all the Anderson stories I did were serious in a way.
But she loses a lot of her flippancy in there, because you know, early on she was all about the kind of the witty one-liners and the retorts and whatnot. But I mean, when you're telling a story about child abuse in Mega City 1, there's not much place for jokes. I mean, saying there's always place for dark humour, because, as already described, you've got the whole Burns Night joke, inverted commas. I wonder if Alan was reacting to the way that your artwork grounded things and responded accordingly.
Yeah, it's possible, I guess.
The early stuff you did on Anderson was in black and white.
The first one, yeah.
And then you graduated to
the next one was colour. Yeah.
And kind of full-blown colour as well, you know, particularly something like Shambhala. It seems almost as if there's no restraint to your palette. Like you kind of, you go, well, I'm just going to go crazy here.
Is that what it looks like?
Well, not in a kind of bad way, but in a kind of you didn't feel any restriction.
No, I assumed I could do as I like.
Right.
I mean, again, it's just part of my feeling about 2000 AD. That you were given free rein to express your own feelings about how comics should be presented.
In terms of physical media, were you using watercolours, acrylics?
I used water-soluble ink.
Right.
Which were perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Because the colours all pop. You know, it's notable how vivid your use of green, your use of red in something like Shambhala is. You know, those inks seem to hold the vivacity.
Yeah, they're great. Eco-line, they're called.
Right.
And I recommend them.
Was that a technique that you picked up working on Looking, or?
Well, when I first colouring for Looking, I was using watercolour. You know, the sort of slabs of colour. But they tend to be a bit greasy. But where did I find it? I don't know where I found the inks from. What gave me that idea? But I was still looking when I was using ink, water-soluble ink.
With something like Shambhala, it nicely brings us onto a topic which you've talked about before, which Alan has talked about before, but that of symbology, because Shambhala and then Mazeworld later on are packed with symbolism, with the use of symbols from religion, from psychology, from... Yes, I see your mantelpiece, you've got a Torah, a Buddha, a crucifix, various other bits and bobs. I mean, you've mentioned before about your interest in kind of Jungian psychology and thought. Do you want to explain a bit about how you came to be interested in that and how it came to be such a part of your art?
I was trying to think about this. I've been interested in psychology since I was a teenager, I think, and read a lot. And of course, I did a counselling course eventually, but that was a kind of end point, really, because I'd been studying all that stuff for a long time, simply because I find it fascinating, and. Yeah, I mean, dreams, symbolism, stuff that means more than it, that contains more than you can see. Yeah, That's great. That's arts, isn't it? All that stuff.
Were you raised in any particular religious tradition?
Well, we were sent to the Baptist Sunday school, but we stopped going to Sunday school when we were about 9 or 10. I did have a brief period of being deeply Christian religious,
right?
But then I met and talked to some communists, and I found myself saying one day, "I don't care what you say, I still believe." And I thought that won't do. That's intellectually just not acceptable.
You're not one for blind faith, then?
No.
So with something like Shambhala, where you're experimenting with forms on the page, you've got circular panels, you're clearly using colour in different ways to denote emotion and things like that. And then you have this amazing burst where Anderson communes with the divine, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely jam-packed with this kind of symbolism. Is this just a case of, I don't know, just borrowing things to put in there, or is there some rhyme or reason to it?
No, I meant it's just borrowed. I mean, it's basically Buddhist stuff, isn't it? What I drew.
Well, it's interesting, the kind of overlap between the stuff that Alan talks about, because I mean he's had a long interest in esotericism and Buddhism and mysticism. Yeah. I mean, was this something you were talking about at the time? Was this something you were sharing, or was it just coming up through his scripts and you were acting accordingly?
Yeah, no, I was just putting into his scripts what I thought was already there.
Right.
Yeah.
Because so much of the kind of profundity of something like Shambhala seems to come out of the relationship between what's happening in the script and what's happening on the page, and it's whatever anybody thinks about the story, there's some quite lofty ideals in there for a 5 or 6 page a week comic book.
Alan does deal in kind of serious ideas, isn't he?
I mean, how do you feel about the exploration of those serious ideas? Because you say you're just borrowing stuff, but to a reader, it seems so much more than that, because you're reaching a potential. You're kind of expanding.
Well, I'm fascinated by all that stuff, and no, I'm not sure how to say about that. I mean, the first art was religious, in all probability. I mean, otherwise, why would cavemen go down into a big, deep, dark hole and draw pictures? I mean, it's obviously got more significance than just actually a drawing of a buffalo. So I've always felt that art and religion are connected.
Yeah.
That the one can't exist without the other. I'm not sure that's what I mean. Yeah, so they're interconnected. I think the desire to make art and the religious experience are closely connected. So being able to tell stories with a kind of religious connection in pictures, and using art to express those ideas, that's great. That's a pleasure to do. It's a pleasure. It's evolving.
Because with symbology, there's so much wrapped up in just some simple lines. So, you draw a cross on a page, and that means so much more than just those lines. As an artist, that's a really powerful tool to wield. To be able to just jot a few lines down and provoke such a reaction, because I'm trying to think, was it those images of the divine in Shambhala are borrowing symbology, they're borrowing images from religion, and that by doing so heightens people's reaction to them because they're symbols they recognize, they're symbols they have a personal relationship with. So it's kind of more than just a picture of a person. You're provoking an emotional reaction.
Well, it would be nice. I mean, it never occurred to me that happened, but yes, it'd be nice if that happened. I mean, it obviously does. I mean, people have said so. I've had people say that like you've been scared of the. You've been frightened. I've had people say certain things I've done, and that's great, but it's not something I think about or. Right. I can say it's simple, but I mean, all I'm trying to do is tell the story I've been given in the best possible way I can, and I mean, I'm bringing to it not just being able to handle a pen, but who I am, what I kind of think, believe, and stuff like that. All very deep.
Because the way you've talked about the way you art, it sounds like it's a very innate process. It's not necessarily a conscious process that you're going through.
No, drawing. I think I've mentioned this before. I can remember drawing and watching myself drawing. I mean, watching my hand draw and thinking, that's interesting. I mean, it becomes a kind of body memory, I think, eventually, if you do it long enough.
Where do you think that comes from? I mean, without getting too profound about it.
I mean, it must be like playing tennis. I mean, tennis players don't think about what the next shot's going to be, do they? It's just their body knows what to do next. Right. And I imagine that's what was happening with me. That having, been drawing for hundreds of years, that it becomes not automatic exactly, but yeah.
Is it the kind of the physical process becomes innate? It becomes like a reflex, so it allows, again, without getting too deep into it, your kind of subconscious, to play. Yeah. Because your body's taken care of. It's doing what it does anyway.
And I do have hand-eye coordination. Quite. I mean, I can draw with this, for instance.
Oh, with a mouse.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So my hand-eye coordination must be pretty good, I think. And always has been. Yeah. Since I was a kid.
Okay. I interviewed Jock, who's an artist who kind of started his career at 2000 AD. He's gone to do Batman and sort of a lot of movie work and whatnot. And one of the things that he mentions is when he's drawing, he puts a line on the page and he sees where it goes. It's kind of, you make a mark and then you build the image around it. Is that the process you go through, or are you much more, this is what I need to draw, so I will get on with it and draw it?
No, I mean, the way I used to work on tracing paper. I used to do all the layouts on tracing paper and then put that onto the board with a blue chalk on the back and just draw it onto the board and then draw. I mean, the actual drawing I had on, the blue line I had on the board was absolutely minimal. But then I would draw and fill it in, but it wasn't. I kind of knew where it was going when I started. I mean, I do paintings differently, but when I was drawing comics, that's the way I worked.
What an absolutely fascinating hour or so of chatting to Arthur. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was wonderful to sit with him and just go through so many aspects of his life and his work. And there's more to come. In 2 weeks' time, there's episode 2 of our interview with Arthur. So make sure that you tune in. If you're joining us for the first time on the Thrillcast, welcome. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do go back through the archive and listen to our other creator interviews with people such as John Wagner, Carlos Esquerra, Mick McMahon, Robin Smith. We also interview fans such as Johnny Vegas and Ben Wheatley. And yeah, let us know what you think about the 2000 AD Thrillcast and about 2000 AD. Email thrillcast, all one word, at 2000ad.com. That's thrillcast, all one word, at 2000ad.com. We shall see you in 2 weeks' time when we've got more from my chat with Arthur Ranson. Until next time, Earthlets, splendid verthrig.
Alert! Alert! Thrill power levels dangerously high. Alert! Alert! Read 2000 AD every week. Ask your comic book store or newsagent now. Subscribe to the galaxy's greatest comic at 2000adonline.com. Subscribe digitally on our apps for Apple, Android, and Windows 10. And download DRM free copies from 2000adonline.com. Alert! Alert! Stand by for urgent updates. Search for 2000AD on Twitter and Facebook. Watch the latest videos at youtube.com/2000AD online. And follow on Instagram at Insta2000AD. Program complete. Shutting down.